person to change, there has to be reflection. So we have to realize that there's a need for change. So a lot of us, let's face it, we don't really feel like there's a need to change. We feel like there's a need to escape our present circumstances. So like, for example, if someone's cheating and they get caught, they don't necessarily feel the need to stop cheating. They feel the necessity to get out of trouble and then not get caught again. But that's a very different thing from feeling the need to start keeping your word. Because this is what it is. Oftentimes, we don't really realize like what's so wrong about it. Like we might say like, oh, it's wrong because you're lying to a person. But we've talked before. When you're lying to a person, it's not just that you're telling them something that's not true. You're literally challenging the very fabric of the universe. You're challenging the very fabric of reality. You're creating a timeline in which case, this is the actual reality. When you lie to a person, you're taking them off course because it changes the literal course of their life. If you cheat on somebody and you get away with it, then this is the path, this is the course of life that you're taking them on. Now, if they had caught you early on, or if you had just never done it in the first place, if you just broken up with them, their life would have gone in this very straight direction. But by lying to them, they're living their life differently than they otherwise would have. You're literally changing a person's life when you lie to them. You're deceiving them about the nature of reality. So it's not a small thing if you understand it in that sense. Now we can say, whatever, fine, but at least we all realize that you're refusing to acknowledge the obvious truth, and that you're treating the changing of a person's life flippantly, like it just doesn't matter. And of course, what does that say about you? I'm a bad person. No, it says something way more nefarious than that. That says that you're a person who just doesn't care about the nature of reality, and that means that you're never going to be able to form meaningful personal relationships. Because you don't care about treating people flippantly, so what does that mean? Well, you probably think people treat you flippantly. Because this is oftentimes a justification. I do it because everybody else does it. Well, everybody lies. Who cares about everybody? I'm not talking about everybody. We're talking about you. Do you not wish to be different? Do you not wish to be something other than what everybody else is? Do you just wish to be a member of a herd? Because what does the herd do? Where one goes, everybody else goes. And that's funny because how often do we brag about the fact that we're a mindless member of a herd? No, we brag about being an individual because we intuitively know that it's a good thing to be that. We intuitively know it's good to not follow the crowd. Now, is it terrible to follow the crowd? No, sometimes the crowd's going in a good direction. You shouldn't diverge from the crowd just because it's the crowd. You should diverge from the crowd when they're wrong. And that takes understanding this thing right here, truth. What's right? What's wrong? Is the crowd going in a bad direction? If so, you have to be willing to separate yourself from the herd, from the crowd. And part of that is recognizing that how you treat people is going to deeply impact you. Not because of karma, but because it shades how you see the world. Everyone lies. If you believe that, then that means you can never trust a person in a relationship. That means that you can never form real intimate connection to somebody. And that means that you're going to deprive yourself of something that you simply could never understand because, as we know, you don't know what you don't know. And if you don't know what it's like to entirely put your trust in a person and have it reciprocated and have it work out, then you're never going to understand the deepest of an intimacy like that. By the same token, if you put all of your trust and faith in a person and then they betray it, again, that's something that you could not learn any other way. Now the question becomes, who are you at this point? What do you become? Because it's expensive. It is very expensive to hope on this. Does it cost you money? Maybe a little bit, but that can come back. But there's something else it can cost you that cannot be recovered. Obviously, it's what? Time. Yeah, it's time. Because all of this timeline right here, that's all time that you can never get back. Now, what you can do maybe is learn something from it, and so that way at least you can make it valuable in some way. I learned that I should never treat a person this way because I see what it does to somebody. And so now you learn not to do that. And it's even worse, by the way, if you think that someone's doing something and they're not, of course that, by the way, this comes from guilty conscience, then that causes you to, again, never be able to form those kinds of relationships with someone. It's so much deeper than just, I'm saying something that's not true. I think I've mentioned before that there's a correlation between intelligence and when a child starts to lie. Because when a child starts to lie, that means that they recognize that psychologically they are different from you. That means that they understand that they have a different knowledge set than you do. And that's not a small thing. That means that they realize that they have a different grasp and understanding of reality than you do. And that's a deep idea. And for like a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old to have that, that's pretty significant. Now sometimes we teach kids to lie. Like we'll say something like, I don't have a marker. And they'll be like, yeah, you do. I don't have a marker. And of course they realize that you're playing a game with them. But they're learning the process of lying. They're learning the process of saying something that isn't true. Once they can kind of do that on their own, now they recognize that they can do this. They can literally change the course of the universe. Now, I don't think a 2-year-old is sitting there thinking, I'm changing the course of the universe. But when you kind of realize that practically you can do it, well, I guess now it kind of answers one of those questions. Why should we bother studying this whole English language arts thing? Because your ability to master language and use language makes you an incredibly dangerous and powerful personality. You know? It's like if I were to ask you, who was the greatest soldier of the Peloponnesian War? Who killed the most people? I don't know. But who wrote the book on the Peloponnesian War? Who used their words? It was Thucydides. We remember Thucydides not because of the fights, not because of the people he slayed, not because of who his top soldiers were, but we remember the person who described it, the person who used the words. Because again, when you have a powerful use of language, you have the power to control this, how people see the world, how people see the universe, how people act and behave. Now, what are you going to use it for? You can use it for good, you can use it for evil. The real danger is that most of us never decide to use it for good or evil. We just kind of go about life. And most evil in the world is done by people who don't decide to be good or evil. They just decide to act. And that's a hard thing for us to get our heads around. I mean, we can come to realize at a certain point, and I think it's a hallmark of maturity for us to realize that most people in the world, they're not against you. They're just out for themselves. And then we don't mean that selfishly, like they just don't care about the world, although lots of people are like that. It's just that we operate in the world in such a way that we end up doing terrible things without even realizing it. You know, how does this kind of thing even happen? This cheating thing even happen? Well, it comes from a very hard base of thinking that, well, I wonder how many of you have done that before. I wonder how many of you have done that, and I wonder how many of you will do that. And if you can examine afterwards how and why you did it. I wonder how many of you would do that, and you began by saying, I would never. Be careful. Whatever you begin by saying, I would never, whatever completes that sentence, get ready. Because you're probably about to do it. Because it's the thing that you're least guarded against. Or you overcompensate by announcing to everybody that you would never do this thing. You know? So be careful with people that way. You should realize the fact. I wonder how many of you can sit there and look at yourself and say, oh yeah, I would cheat if I had the opportunity. Because I'm a terrible person like that. Because I lack self-confidence and self-esteem. So anybody who throws me a little bit of attention, I eat it up like buffalo wings, man. Because that's how I get my validation. And once you recognize that about yourself, good. Good. Because now what can you do? Avoid it. Don't be around it. When someone starts to feed your ego, you can recognize and go, yeah, feels great, but I know what I'm going to do if I allow this to happen. I know where I'm going to go with this. That's so much safer than to sit there and say, oh yeah, they're feeding my ego, but you know what, it's okay because I can rise above everybody else. You know? It's okay to, if you have a boyfriend or girlfriend, it's okay to talk to that person in your math class, isn't it? It's just talking. You know? No big deal. I mean, yeah, they sent you that friend request, but that's because you guys share a class. And lots of people accept requests. It doesn't have to be like an actual friend. It could just be people you know in a network, right? Yep. I mean, it's called social networking, right, for a reason, right? And just because they message you at like 8 o'clock, it's a question about the math class. That's all it is. They know that question, and you're doing really well with your D+, and so you're going to help them out with their math. And then when they message you at midnight or something like that, just asking what you're up to, well, yeah, I mean, just because they're bored and you're in the same network and. It's a very old story, man. It's a very old story. That's the very story that goes back to our oldest literature. That's the story that goes back to, it goes back to Adam and Eve. That's the whole thing of Adam and Eve. The serpent shows up, and there's the tree, and they're told, you can eat from every single tree in the garden, except that one. Is there any greater guarantee that they're going to eat from that tree than to be told any tree except for that? And then what happens? Well, Adam and Eve, they're separated. She's walking around by herself. Specifically, they were supposed to always be together as a husband and wife, but they weren't. Adam was doing whatever he was doing. And then she's by herself, and the serpent approaches, and he's like, hey, check out that tree. And she looks at it. That's the first thing she does. She's like, yeah, that tree is pleasing to the eye. But it's okay. I mean, it's just a math class. It's just a friendship class. No big deal. And then it progresses. Didn't he say you can eat of any tree? No, it's any tree except for that one. Did he really say that, though? Well, yeah, he really did. Do you know why he said it? Because he knows that if you eat it, you're going to become a god as well. So you see the progression. It's the oldest story in the world, man. You know, we can justify anything. We can never underestimate our ability to rationalize anything. You know? Some people, yeah, you can defy this. Sure, absolutely. But you have to be an absolute sea of virtue to receive even a stream of pollution and not become impure yourself. You have to recognize it about yourself. Are you an ocean? Some people are. But are you? You have to know it. Or are you a bathtub? I don't know. Are you a sink? Are you a sea? Are you a sea that hopes to become an ocean someday? We have to guard ourselves. And it all begins with the same process. First and foremost, to know yourself. To know yourself. Know what your strengths are. Know what your weaknesses are. Guard against them. Because if all you're doing is hoping that you're going to be able to stand up against temptation, well, as we know, hope is an expensive commodity that only a few people can afford. You know, maybe you're the person who can afford it. Maybe you're like the other 99% of people who just simply cannot. Questions, comments, concerns, complaints, criticisms, critiques? Welcome back. Yeah. Happy Monday. Oh, Tuesday. Happy Tuesday.